Alright, so welcome to Digital Archaeology Reconstruction. I'm Luca Ottonello and this is Episode 1, Foundations and Interface. In this series you learn 3D reconstruction from absolute zero using Blender. Blending historical accuracy with creative design. By the end of this session, you'll master Blender interface, build ethical documentation from day one, and create your first digital heritage artifacts. Something that we will continue working on as this series goes on. So, before we dive into the software, let's talk about archaeogaming. What is it? Archaeogaming is defined as the study of archaeology through and in video games, and the study of video games through archaeology. It has three parts. One is the archaeology of games, analyzing games as a cultural artifact. Two, archaeology in games, studying historical representation within games. And three, archaeology through games, using games as research and educational tools. Our approach falls into that third category. We are creating a game-ready reconstruction for educational purposes. Now, in digital reconstruction, ethics is our compass. We follow 4 principles for responsible reconstruction. First of all, representation. Who is included? Who is left out? Think about, for example, the Glasgow Necropolis, which we are going to be working on. It's working class versus wealthy monuments. Or Stirling Castle, which we're going to do a mishmash between Stirling Castle and Necropolis in this tutorial. And in the next few ones. It's a military versus domestic space. Second, authority. Who controls the narrative? We're often outsiders. We must acknowledge that and document all the creative decisions. Third, benefit. Who benefits? Who might be harmed? Our purpose is educational, which is public benefit. We avoid exploitation of sacred spaces. And fourth, transparency. Distinguish between evidence-based and speculative elements. Document your sources meticulously and credit all references. So, as mentioned briefly above, our fusion project combines 2 iconic Scottish sites, Glasgow Necropolis and Stirling Castle. Glasgow Necropolis is a Victorian garden cemetery from 1833 with over 50,000 burials and 3,500 monuments in Greek, Egyptian, and Gothic styles. Stirling Castle is a strategic fortress dating from the 12th century with Renaissance palace additions and key roles in the wars of the Scottish independence. Our fusion? Imagine a castle structure on the Necropolis Hill with tombs integrated into the castle walls, a blend of medieval castle foundations with Victorian-era tomb additions. This is a mix that would not make sense in everyday life and in historical facts. But it's something that sometimes happens in games, and how can you do this right without disrupting completely the usefulness of understanding history or culturally destroying something? This is what we're going to learn throughout all of this series. Alright, so follow along. Let's start by installing Blender. Open your browser and go to blender.org. Click on the big Download Blender button, choose your operating system. I recommend the LTS long-term support version for stability. While it downloads, we're going to go and do some other things. So keep it in the background and we'll get back to this one very soon. So why use Blender for digital archaeology? First of all, economics. It's free, open source, no financial barriers, community-driven, and perfect for heritage projects on a budget. Second, capability. It's industry strong, full pipeline from modeling to animations, photogrammetry integration, game engine export ready. It's used by AA studios and indie developers alike, so you will learn skills that will allow you to get into big or small companies and still have the same skills as the experts. Third, ethics. Its open source philosophy aligns with the open heritage movement. No proprietary lock-in, skills are transferable, and it supports long-term preservation. And by the way, did you know that Blender has 20 million downloads? Was used on Spider-Man No Way Home? It's an active community of more than 500,000 artists. So think about it. We're not just learning any tool, something that you will have to forget because you're learning another tool very soon. But we're learning that tool that will be applied to everything and eventually might become just industry standard. Alright, so let's get back to the installation. Is the installation complete? Good. Launch Blender, you see the splash screen. This is one of the latest, most developed designs that they made on Blender. So have a look at it, think about what you like about it and what you might add to your own design through whatever you see there. Anyway, after you looked at it, close it. Now, before we do anything, we'll have to set preferences. This is something you'd have to do exactly at the beginning because everything you do later on might be influenced by these preferences. If you don't do it properly the first time, you won't be able to learn how to use it. So click Edit, Preferences at the top, and we are in the Preferences window. First of all, Themes. Click Themes, select Dark. This reduces eye strain, in my experience. Then go into Interface and enable Tooltips. This helps learning. Viewport, check Auto Depth and rotate around selection. This makes navigation intuitive. Navigation, I prefer turntable mode. Select with right mouse button. We'll use this. Now save and load. Set the autosave to 2 minutes and keep 10 versions, or put 10 versions if it doesn't have it. This saves hours of rework. Finally, key map. We'll use defaults. Click the 3 dots at the bottom left and save preferences. Done. Most of the time it just saves by itself, but this is just an extra precaution. Then wrap up. Blender is ready. In the next part, we'll tour the interface, and if you have any issues, check the descriptions for troubleshooting tips. Remember to save these preferences once. They'll load every time, so whenever you're opening Blender from now on, they will be there. So once all the preferences are done and you close Blender, open it again. Don't panic. We'll explore this area step by step, so everything should be as you saved it, and should work as I'm going through the same way. You'll see the 3D viewport. That's where the magic happens. That's where the default cube lives. That's the first thing you see when you enter Blender, and the first thing you delete, strangely enough. The outliner shows you some scene hierarchy, your object list and visibility toggles. So the objects that you have in the scene, for example the cube right now, and the visibility toggles, if you click it on and off, it will show and make the cube invisible. The Properties panel is where you adjust object properties, modifiers, materials, and render settings. This is something we'll talk about very soon. The Timeline handles animation and video editing. This is some advanced stuff that we'll work on in some other videos later on. And the toolbar on the left gives you quick access to modeling tools and scripting brushes. Again, something that we'll look at very soon. Alright, so let's get back into Blender. Now that Blender is installed, let's understand what you're looking at. This interface might seem overwhelming, as I explained before in the previous slide, but we'll break it down piece by piece. By the end of it, you'll know exactly where everything is. The 3D area at the center, so the 3D viewport, as I mentioned above, this is where you see and manipulate 3D objects. Top right, the outlier. This lists every object in your scene, like the cube as I said before. Below that's the Properties panel. This is context sensitive, so whenever you're doing something different, it will change. It shows different options depending on what you selected. Bottom, Timeline for animation, and left, toolbar with modeling tools, for example, sculpting. Now, see the tabs at the top. Layout, modeling, sculpting, etc. These are workspaces, preset arrangements for different tasks. We'll customize our own. Right-click on Layout tab, choose Duplicate Area, and a new tab appears. Double-click on its name and rename it Archaeology Modeling, or something that you like. This is now our custom workspace. Then we'll go into the panel adjustment. You can resize the panels. However, hover between panels until the cursor changes to a double arrow. Then drag it. I like my 3D viewport large, outline a medium, and properties panel wide enough to see all the options but nothing else. Arrange your preferences, and then your changes are saved automatically on the workspace. You don't need to do anything after this. After this, just wrap up. Now we have a customizable workspace. So now we're looking at navigation in 3D space. This is one of the essential skills to be able to manipulate objects in 3D. With your mouse, middle mouse button drags orbits around. Shift plus middle mouse button drags pans and view. Scroll wheel zooms in and out. With your keyboard, numpad 1 gets your front view. Numpad 3 is the right side view. Numpad 7 is top view. And numpad 5 toggles between perspective and orthographic views. Practice orbiting around the default cube, panning to see different angles, zooming in close, and trying all the different numpad views. Play around with it for a bit. Don't get frustrated if you don't learn it quickly. It will become so natural after you've been using this that you won't really need to remember what I said. Alright, so to reinforce this a bit, I'm going to show you directly on Blender how this is done. This is crucial. 3D navigation is like learning to drive before going on a road trip. Master this and everything else becomes easier. We'll cover mouse controls and keyboard shortcuts. So first, the mouse. Middle mouse button, press and drag. This orbits around your selection. Try it out now. Select the default cube and right-clicking, then middle drag. Feel how you rotate around it. Next, hold shift while middle dragging. This pans, slides the view without rotating. Finally, scroll the wheel zoom in and out and practice orbit, pan, and zoom. These are all movements that will become basically like moving your steering wheel while you're driving. Now, keyboard. I tend to use this a bit less, but it really depends on your style of work. Your numpad is important. Number 1, front view. Number 3, right side. Number 7, top view. And try to press each of them. Notice how the view snaps quickly. Numpad 5 toggles between perspective and orthographic. Perspective has dead conversions. Orthographic has a parallel line. Better for modeling most of the time. Numpad 0, camera view. We'll use this later. This is something that we don't really have to worry about right now, as we haven't even worked on the camera itself yet. Then let's try doing a general practice, right? We'll say a command and you do it. Ready? So, select cube, orbit around it, pan to the left, and zoom in close. Right, let's try that one. Numpad 1 for front view. Numpad 5 for orthographic. Numpad 7 for top. Numpad 3 for side. Back to perspective. Now frame the cube. Press the period on the main keyboard. Good. Try now repeating that faster. That gives you a little bit of practice. You can pause this video or continue if you want. Up to you. But I suggest you practice a little bit before you continue. Troubleshooting. Common issues. If you have no middle mouse button, emulate it in Preferences. If you have no numpad, emulate it on Enable Emulate Numpad in Preferences. If you get lost, press Home key to see everything, or period to frame section. If view is upside down, numpad 1, then numpad 1 again. Navigation complete. Practice 5 minutes daily this week. Muscle memory is key. Next part, adding your first objects. By the way, while you're doing your object work, that counts practice too, so don't worry if you don't want to continuously repeat some boring routine like I did. But it's always good to give some muscle memory. Now, you get started with primitives. Everything in 3D starts with basic shapes. We'll use 4 primitives in total. Plane, 4 vertices, 1 face, great for ground, water, or paths. Not much else because the bottom becomes invisible or deformed. A cube, your foundation for walls, stones, and blocks, and many other things, but for now let's keep it down. A sphere, perfect for domes, rounded details like tomb ornaments. A cylinder, ideal for columns, pillars, trees, and Celtic crosses, for example. Add any of these with Shift plus A. You get a menu and you get to select one of them. So let's start with your first meshes. Now we will create in Blender 3D objects that are called meshes. Today we add our first mesh and understand how the 3D cursor works. Press Shift plus A. This opens an Add menu. Move to Mesh. You'll see primitives, cube, UV sphere, cylinder, plane, etc. Choose a cube. Cube appears at the 3D cursor location. The 3D cursor is that red and white circle. It's an insertion point. So wherever it is, it will appear there. Now move the 3D cursor. Shift right, click anywhere. Try it. The cursor jumps. Now add another cube. Shift A, Mesh, Cube. It appears at the new cursor's location. This is a powerful, precise tool for placing objects. Now, deleting objects. This will be also very common. Let's clean up. Right-click the second cube to select it and press X. A confirmation menu appears. Choose Delete or press the Delete key. The cube disappears. Keep 1 cube for the next exercises. Now, other primitives. Try the other primitives. Add a sphere, a cylinder, a plane. Notice their different structures. The sphere is made of triangles. The cylinder is a circle cross-section. The plane is flat. Delete these extras. Select X, delete. Play around with them. Do what you want. Just keep the cube in the middle because we will be working on that. Alright, so now you will be able to add and remove basic shapes. Remember Shift A to add and Shift right click to move cursor, X to delete. Now we're going to go on the holy trinity of 3D manipulation: move, rotate, and scale. The shortcut keys are G for grab or move, R for rotate, and S for scale. You can constrain movement to an axis. Press G, then X to move left or right, G and Y upward or back, forward and back, and G and Z up and down. For precision, you can press GZ2 and enter, and that moves exactly 2 units up. RX45, enter, rotates 45 degrees around the x-axis. S.5, enter, scales to half size. The colored arrows are your guidelines: red for X, green for Y, blue for Z. They never change. Now we're going to work a little bit on transform tools. So, transform tools change position, rotation, and size. These are our most used tools. Shortcuts G, R, and S are grab, move, rotate, and scale. Grab and move G. Select the cube, press G, the cube follows our mouse. Click to place it, so G will not have any effect. Now it's constrained. Press G, then Z. Now the movement will only be up and down. Press G and X, left and right. G and Y, forward and back. For precise movement, GZ2, enter. Cube moves exactly 2 units up. Try it out. Rotate. Press R. Rotate freely. For axis constraint, Rx rotates around the x-axis, Ferris wheel. Ry, like a record. Rz, like a steering wheel. Precise Rx45, enter. 45, rotation. Negative Rx45 enters a minus 45 rotation. Now scaling, something that I find I use the most of all. Press S, scale uniformly, so it will scale everything the same size. Sx scales only width. Sy, depth. Sz, height. And precise, as above. S.5 halves the size. S2 doubles the size. Sx.5 and Sy2 makes short and wide. Don't worry if this sounds confusing, just try them out and see what happens. It's always better seeing visually what I'm talking about than just remembering numbers and the letters. Now let's go in combination practice. Exercise making tall, thin, rotated tombstone shapes. Add a cube, SZ3, make it tall, SX.3, SY.3, make it thin, RZ15, slightly rotated, GY2, move forward. Do this now and check your transforms in the N panel. So if you press N, at any point you'll see a panel on the right hand side that will show you exactly how you change the cube. Wrap up and undo. If you make mistakes, there's always a way out. Ctrl plus Z undoes everything. Ctrl Shift Z redoes everything. So if you undo something and you actually wanted it to be done, you can redo it again. At this point, you should have the tools mastered, at least the transform ones. The next one will be working with objects and edit mode, which are a new bag of interesting tools to work with. So Blender has several essential modes, but the most essential of them all are the object and edit modes. Object mode is where you manipulate the whole object. Think of it like an excavator moving a large stone. Not the small things, not the details about it, just the large stone. Edit mode is where you manipulate geometry, vertices, edges, and faces. Think of it as an archaeologist cleaning the fine details, so the tiny details can be all changed, but not in random ways as sculpting, but in precise mathematical ways. Toggle between them with the tab key. That's an easy way to pass between object and edit mode. In Blender are two fundamental modes, object and edit mode. Understanding this distinction prevents countless frustrations. Object mode demonstration, for example. Let's see how it works. In object mode default, select the cube. Press G, move it, the entire cube moves. Press R, rotate it, and the whole cube rotates. Press S, scale it, and the entire cube scales. Press Tab, you're now in edit mode. The cube shows orange edges and vertices. Press 1 for vertices select, so the little point. Click a vertex, for example a corner point. Press G and move it. You will deform the cube. Press 2 for edge select. Now you select the line of the cube. It will select an edge. We have to be right about the terminology. So it's a line between the two vertices. Move it. See how it deforms it differently. Press 3 for face select. This selects a face, so between the 4 points or 3 points depending on what type of form you have. You move it, and then it will just deform the object in another completely different way. If you press Tab and return to the object mode, you'll see that your object is now completely modified. Select, and then select the bottom face. Press X and delete faces. So remember, delete faces, not vertices or anything else, just the faces. Because otherwise you'll remove things that you still need. select the top face now, and press E, which is a new command, to extrude, to extend the face, and Z to constrain. Move up. It will move exactly up and down, nothing else. Tap to object mode and see the result. Alright, now let's go into the viewport shading. Press Z to switch to viewport shading modes. The wireframe lets you see through objects, like an archaeological dig site plan or the plan of a building. Solid is your default working view, the one that you always see, the green one. Material preview shows textures and lighting. So if you place a texture, like the color of an object and the lighting that reflects on that color, we'll go into more detail into this. I'm just trying to make it as easy as possible. That will show in this view, but for now we have to leave it alone. And rendered gives you the full quality final look. So well, the lights are there, the camera is in the right position, the shades are done properly, and the object is finalized. This is how it will look at the end. Now let's go into more detail about selecting geometry. Precise selection is the key to detailed modeling. We'll learn vertex, edge, and face selection plus selecting tools. So a bit on top of what we've already done in a previous tutorial, but with more details on how to do it very precisely. So vertex, edge, and face selection we already touched upon, but in edit mode. Press 1 for vertex selection, press 2 for edge selection, and press 3 for face selection. Try each. Notice that the cursor changes, selecting multiple click and drag or shift while clicking. So when you've selected one of them, it won't do it with all of them together. So you'll have to select either edge or line or face. This will be able to select everything together. So what I'm talking about is taking the little ones, as I'm showing here. So for example, the vertices, this ones, you select them all together by dragging like a square around it. And now you have two vertices that you're dragging around. Same thing with the edge selection. I select two edges, I pick them, and now both edges are moving. Faces, same thing. You can do more than two. So I'm just using it as an example here. Now, selection tools. Press A and select all. Alt plus A deselects all. So you can either select or not select everything. Press B for box selection. So like this, you can drag the mouse and select everything that's within that box. Press C for circle select. So whenever you're clicking with this circle around, everything that's within this circle will be selected. And ESC to exit. Press L with the mouse hovering over whatever selection you want, and it will select that specific selection. It's on top of it. Be careful when it's on vertex control or face control, the selection may be different using this circle. Now, there are more advanced tools that you don't necessarily need to use now, but I'm going to just give you an example of each. Loop select. Alt and click on an edge to select edge loops. Ring select. Control Alt click selects an edge ring. Select similar. So Shift G opens menu, similar normals, length, etc. So you select the ones that are similar to each other. Invert selection. Control I selects the opposite of the current selection. But these are complex and you can play around with them, but you don't have to be an expert on them right now. Now let's do a bit of practice. Selecting stone faces. Create a wall with varied stones. So take a cube, scale to a wall shape. So your traditional cube, hold it like this, it will become a long wall. Go in edit mode and do face select. You select the different faces and select random faces by holding shift, so you can select more than one. Press E to extrude them slightly. That makes the stones, it makes the illusion of having stones. select different faces, extrude different amounts. So that makes it randomized. The result is a rough stone wall texture. Control R should give you a line that cuts the object. So if you don't have multiple faces that you want to select on the wall, or you didn't extrude, Control R creates a cutting line where you can cut in several sections, and then you can just select each one of the faces created to create this little blocks of wall that come out. But the easiest way to do this, as you're a beginner, if you don't want to use the Control R part, is go in edit mode and extrude on either side the cube, and then extrude again until you have several cubes all attached to each other, and then E after you select some of those faces, right? As I'm doing here. Now, the important thing for historians, especially, and archaeologists and scientists, is the references and ethics. Historical references ensure accuracy. Use resources like Historic Environment Scotland, for example, if you're in Scotland, Wikimedia Commons, and the National Library of Scotland or England, Britain, whichever country you are. But right now we're using Scottish environments, so I would suggest the National Library of Scotland or the Historic Environment Scotland. Ethical sourcing is key. Use public domain, Creative Commons, museum open access, or properly licensed material. Do not just copy and paste from the internet things that might be licensed by other people, and they will claim ownership if you ever try to sell them or use them for purposes that you don't agree with. Avoid all copyrighted content without permission. If you get permission, well, that's good. If you don't, or if you don't ask, that's going to create a problem in the long run. In Blender, add reference images with Shift-A image reference. For every reference document, source, license, created context was speculative. Basically, every image you use for reference within your environment, even though the image might not be there in the end, always have them with source reference, who, where you got it, license that they're connected to, crediting the person that created or took this image, describe the context, where is it, what does it do, or what are we getting out of this, and especially this point is important, what is real and not, what is speculative, because many things are recreated but they're not the actual real thing, and this becomes a very big issue within heritage especially. Now here we're going to the nitty-gritty of the ethical documentation setup. Introduction and importance is the first thing. Ethics without documentation is just for intention. Documentation makes ethics optionable and verifiable. We'll create our own documentation system, so our own very detailed file system, which is not only useful for ethical purposes, but also for ease of access. If you imagine you have millions of objects in your computer, it's going to start very soon becoming unmanageable. So let's give it an order. Well, look at this. Open the text editor, create a source text in the project folder, template, source documentation. Project, Glasgow Necropolis times Stirling Castle Fusion. Creator, your name, date started, when you're starting it, and license CC by 4.1, intended for final work. So you're giving this open license, or you can choose your own license type. Reference images. That's another file. File Stirling Castle front JPEG. Find a picture or take a picture. The source I have here is Historic Environment Scotland. URL, use the actual URL we found it. CC by 4.0, that allows the use with reference to the actual authors. Usage, primary reference for gatehouse proportions, for example. Notes, color corrected for visibility. So if the color is not exactly the same as it was, maybe lighter, that's how it is. Second file, let's try another one. Glasgow Necropolis Overview JPEG. Source, Wikimedia Commons. URL, just put a URL with the place where you got it. Public domain. for license, usage, layout, reference. Notes, for example, 1890s photograph, black and white. So it describes why this image is particular. The next one is the text template. So create an ethics log. This is very important. An example of a log within the text document would be the date, tombstone 1 creation, for example, the object that you created, decision, you took a decision to make a simple rectangular shape, for example. Reasons, beginner exercise, representation in common Victorian style. Evidence based on general cemetery surveys, what we normally see in cemeteries. Speculation, exact proportions estimated, because we don't know this exact tombstone, so it's an estimate. Cultural consideration, no specific individual reference, so nothing was very importantly culturally associated, so we don't need to. Benefit, educational purposes only. If you want to sell it later on, you need to change this, and you need to give justifications and cover it with a lot of background information allowing you to do the selling. Now, every 3D designer will attest to this. You need to block out your scene first. So everything starts basically like Minecraft. Start by blocking out big shapes first. Set your scale, 1 Blender unit equal 1 meter. Place primitives for major structures, cubes for walls, cylinders for trees, and establish proportions and spatial relationships before adding details. This saves hours of rework and ensures everything fits in the right proportion. The tutorial following will give you a lot more detail than this, but this is a general idea of what we're going to do. So the first thing I always do when I'm building something, because it's also uncomfortable going back and forth or looking at the image on the table or behind the screen in Blender or in the side screen, everything becomes very difficult. The best way is to place the image directly within Blender. So references ground our work in reality. Before modeling, we set up reference images. First, ethical resourcing. Use only properly licensed images, as I keep on reiterating. And I've provided links in the description to public domains and CC by archives. Download one front view of Stirling Castle Gatehouse, one side view of Glasgow Necropolis monuments, and save it to your reference folders. Name them clearly, Stirling Castle Gatehouse front, and create source text document for each image with source URL and license. So you're starting to work on that system that I showed you before. Set up your Blender. In Blender, in the front view, numpad 1, press N to open sidebar, click background images, and add an image. Browse to your reference, set opacity to 0.5 so it's slightly transparent, and adjust offset XY to center. Set the size to appropriate scale, and repeat for side view, numpad 3. Now you can model while looking at the references without having to constantly move around on odd angles. This can also be done by simply dragging the image and dropping it into the environment, but then you'll just have to place the image, again using the numpads to set the proper placement. Another way also of doing this, there are different ways. I mean, my specific one out of laziness is just drop and drag the image within the Blender file. But you can also use a board reference. Create a reference board, add a plane in Properties, Material, and add new material, switch to Shader Editor, and add Image Texture node. Load reference, connect to BSDF, scale plane to image proportions, and this will create a 3D reference you can place in the scene. So it's basically a plane with a texture on top. I went through a lot of the texturing tutorial there in kind of vague ways. Do not worry if you can't do this, or if it's too difficult to understand, or if you got only half of it. The only thing I showed you here is that you can actually place an image of another object to use as reference, but there's no detail of all the other things you would do if this was an actual texture. Now, with the documentation, document each reference in source's text with file name, source, license, usage notes. For example, Stirling Castle Gatehouse, Historic Environment Scotland, CC BY, primary reference for gate proportions. Alright, so now it's time for our first heritage artifacts. We'll create a Victorian era tombstone using only basic tools. This builds muscle memory for our fusion project. Add a cube, Shift A, Mesh Cube. We need a tall thin shape, so scale, press SZ 0.3, Enter, which makes it flat. SY 0.5, Enter, which makes it narrower. Now SX 1.2, Enter, slightly wider, and that's our tombstone base. Now tab to edit mode, press 3 for face selection, click at the top face, and press E to extrude, to pull it up. Now press Z to constrain vertically, so only the upward movement will count, and type 1, Enter. The top will extrude upward 1 unit. This creates an upright portion. Now, beveling edges, because a tombstone is not just a cube. Edges in reality aren't perfectly sharp. Select all with A, press Ctrl B for bevel, and drag mouse towards the edges. It should create the round shape in the edges. Click to set, or type 0.05, Enter, for precise 0.05 unit bevel. Bevel makes objects look realistic compared to the cubish Minecraft type. Step 4. Finishing touches. Tab to object mode, rename, select the tombstone, press F2, type Tombstone Victorian 1. Move it GZ 0.15, raises it off the ground. Rotate slightly, RZ5, natural cement placement, cemetery placement. And save Ctrl 5. Now we're gonna go on to Blender magic. Modifiers are like non-destructive magic. They let you change your mind without starting over, so without destroying what is at the base. Key modifiers to learn are Array for repeating objects like walls and tombstones, Bevel for smoothing edges, Subsurface Division for adding smoothness, Mirror for symmetrical modeling, and Solidify to add thickness to things. Apply the modifiers only when necessary. Stay non-destructive as long as possible. So basically the modifiers will be there, but you can cancel them at any time to go back to the basic structure. But once you apply them, so there's a button at the top of the modifier that says apply, that will be impossible to do again. So that will stay there forever, and you'll have to start all over again if you made a big mistake. So apply them only at the end when you've done everything. So why do we use duplication and array modifiers? Manual copying is tedious. Blender offers a smart duplication, basic duplication, and array modifiers for patterns. Basic duplication, select your tombstone, press Shift D. A duplicate will appear attached to your cursor. Move it, click it to place. The duplicate is independent, so it will not, if you modify this one, it will not modify the initial one. Try Alt E instead. This creates a linked duplicate. If you change the original, duplicate will change too. It's useful for multiple identical objects. Try not to confuse them, because then you end up modifying things that shouldn't be modified. And it gets really confusing when there's a lot of objects doing this. Array modifier is a more advanced version of this. You select an object in Properties panel on the right, click the wrench icon, that is modifiers, click Add Modifier, Array. If it's not there, search Array. Instantly, you'll see multiple copies of your object. The parameters will change how these copies do, how many there are, and what exactly which position they're going to have. Count number of copies, relative offset, distance between copies, as multiples on the object size. Try count 10 and relative offset of x 1.5. Row should appear. The magic. Now the offset type. 3 offset types. Relative offset based on object size, constant offset, fixed distance, object offset, follow another object's transformation. For our cemetery, use relative offset x 1.2 for tombstones. Constant offset z equals 0 for walls stacking, and object offset for curved paths. This should be able to give you a similar line of tombstones one next to the other. Now create a cemetery row. Select your best tombstone, so the one that you modified and looks the most like a tombstone, or the one you particularly like yourself. It doesn't have to be something that I like or the general public does, it's for you. Add the array modifier, count 8, relative offset x 1.3, enable merge and first blast, adjust offset for natural spacing, rename collection tombstone row 1. The document will be array used for efficiency cemetery layout modeling. So remember always to modify the document text. Your first homework, if you choose to do this, and I advise you try this out, is to create 10 unique tombstones. Start with a cube, various shapes and sizes, try a Celtic cross or an obelisk, a table tomb. Keep them historically plausible, and document each in your ethics log. The more you practice, the faster this will get. Now let's work towards the castle wall foundations. This is to expand the work that we did with tombstones and making it into a regular wall. Castle walls are architectural marvels. We'll start with the foundation, which is the base that supports everything. This introduces a loop cut for detail. So the wall block. Add the cube, scale to foundation dimensions. So SX4, enter, 4 meters long, SY 0.5, 0.5 meters thick, SZ 2 meters tall. This is our wall segment. Now we're going to have to do loop cuts. But remember the Ctrl R that I briefly mentioned before. Tap to edit mode, press Ctrl R for loop cut. Hover over the wall. A proper line will appear. Scroll the mouse 3 times. Well, once 3 loops appear, and click to confirm. Loop cuts add geometry for detail without adding objects. So basically you're cutting the object without cutting it. It makes sense in a little bit. Stone pattern. Press 2 for edge select. Select one horizontal edge loop. Alt-click edge. Press GY to move along the y-axis. Move slightly to create uneven stone pattern. Repeat for other loops. Vary the movement. Real walls aren't perfectly aligned, so irregularity is part of it, part of interpretation. Then you have to have vertical variation. Select some vertical edges, hold Shift, press GZ to move up and down, creating height variations. Select random faces. With 3, press E to extrude slightly for protruding stones. This creates realistic irregularity. In the document, as usual, at the end, you'll have to write a wall foundation based on Stirling Castle's irregular stonework. Medieval walls used available stones, not uniform blocks, and rename it Wall Foundation 1. So your second piece of homework, if you choose to do it, and it doesn't have to be like the image I showed, that was very regular, can be irregular. Try to follow what I did before with the variation, that was more precise. Create a model of a castle wall section. Reference Stirling Castle, walls around 8 meters high, stones about half a meter by 1 meter. Include the crenellations, merlons for cover, crenels for gaps. Use the array modifiers to repeat the pattern, and document your design decisions in the text as you're going to go into science final steps that need to be done so that the scene is perfectly prepared for our following tutorials. A clean scene is a productive scene. Organization becomes critical as your model grows. We'll name objects and use collections. Renaming objects. Select an object, press F2. The name highlights. The new name, type the new name for your consistent naming system. So remember that you have to keep working on it. 0.1 and 0.1 and 0.2 and 0.3, these are the best conventions. For example, wall section 0.1, tombstone Celtic 0.1, path segment 0.1. Include type and number. Avoid cube 001. I've had some instances where I created, without thinking, millions of cubes, and then I had to go through all of them and change their names. That doesn't work well. Now, collections. Collections are folders and objects combined in one. So as you would do a file, a folder for the text file or for your Blender file outside, within Blender, the collections create files and folders for objects that are there. Press M, choose New Collection, name it Walls, after having selected the objects, by the way. All selected objects will move there. In Outliner, collections can be collapsed or expanded. Visibility, like the eye icon, hide reveal, monitor icon, disabled in renders, and arrow icon, selectable. This basically makes sure that if you don't want to select something, you remove the arrow. You won't be able to select the object in the 3D view. Visibility, you won't be able to see it at all, but it will still be rendered. And rendered, the monitor icon, disable render. So in the final work, you won't see the object unless this is enabled. Collection structure is simple. Create these collections. 0.0 references, 0.1 terrain, 0.2 walls, 0.3 tombstones, 0.4 architecture, 0.5 details, 0.6 lights, and 0.7 cameras. All these are background images, round hills, castle walls, all grave markers, doors, windows, small objects, light sources, and camera angles. All this will be divided so they won't be selected or accidentally moved out of other collections. And we'll work on it as we go along with building our castles. Color coding is also good. In Properties, Object, Viewport Display, set color walls, gray, tombstones white, terrain brown, etc. This visual coding helps the selection visually. If everything is gray, very difficult to distinguish things. Wrap up and best practices are the usual. Rule: never leave objects named cube. Remember that is the biggest mistake, always in collections. Use prefixes for easy sorting. Save organization time is equal more modeling time. So the more order in your system, the faster and more models you can create. To the saving and autosave, this is the nightmare of things. And I didn't do it at the beginning because hopefully all the mistakes didn't need to be saved. But at this point, when you have substantial amount of things done, this needs to be saved properly. The most common thing that happens as a horror story, I've lost hours of work. Everyone will, unless they save properly. Let's establish a bulletproof saving habit from day one. Manual saving. First save, Ctrl S. Choose folder, your project folder, name Necrocastle 01 or version 01 Blend. Blender saves everything, objects, materials, settings, versions. Next, save Necrocastle version 2. Increment with major changes. Never overwrite until sure. So basically, if you create something new, save it as a new file because the previous one might actually be better. You might make mistakes that cannot be undone after. Then set up the autosave. Edit, preferences, save and load, set. Save versions 10, with 10 backups. Autosave every 2 minutes. Compress file on, save space, because you'll have a lot of space taken away from 3D objects. Blender will now autosave every 2 minutes to temporary locations. So this will not occupy space because after the temporary file has been overridden, it will be deleted. There's also a way to recover crushed work in case Blender just crashes. If Blender crashes, reopen, go file, recover, autosave. Browse to see users or wherever you have app data roaming for Blender, Foundation, Blender. Versions, autosave. Find the latest Blender file. Also file, recover, last session. That's the easiest one because it should have saved their last session. Now, we talked about rendering a lot, but without the basic camera that has been set up properly, this will be very difficult. Cameras capture your work for presentation. We'll position a basic camera and learn camera view. So, selecting and moving a camera is simple. Select the camera object, you see it, right-click on it, press G to move. For precise placement, just like an object, G, Z 10, 10 units up, G, Y minus 15, 15 back. Press R to rotate, and camera point towards its arrow. Align with your C. Camera view. Press numpad 0. You will now see through the camera. You will be the camera. Adjust the position while in camera view. Press N, scroll to view, and check lock camera to view. Now navigation moves the camera. Just uncheck when it's done because otherwise you'll just move with the camera when you don't want to move it. Camera settings. In properties, camera, type perspective, natural or orthographic depending on what you want, technical. Focal length 35 millimeters standard, 24 millimeters wide, 50 millimeters normal. Clipping, this is very important, a lot of problems come up in this. It's start 0.1 meters and end at 100 meters or more. You see everything the closer you are and the further you are, otherwise it will clip, it will not show what is too near or too far. Shift, correct perspective distortion. Multiple cameras. You can add more cameras with Shift A and camera. Each can have a different angle. Take the active camera, select the camera, control numpad 0, and render uses the active camera. So name the cameras camera overview and camera digital tombstone so you know which camera you're rendering in that particular moment which you selected. Now, to practice this, set up 3 camera angles for your own tombstone, 1 front view, 1 close detail, and 1 side angle, and switch between them with numpad 0 and try to render out them. See what happens. Remember that you need a light, so do not delete the light, otherwise you won't be able to see anything with the camera. Now we'll do the first render test. The rendering converts 3D data into 2D images. Our first render test tests our setup, so don't expect masterpieces yet. It's just a technical check to see if we can actually render the image. Two main engines are there in Blender: Eevee, real-time fast, and Cycles, ray trace realistic. For now, properties, render properties, and render engine Eevee. Device GPU compute if you have NVIDIA AMD GPUs, else just GPU. The output settings, output properties in the list will be resolution 1920 x 1080 Full HD. Do not go further than this because there's no need. Percentage 50% for test faster. Format PNG, lossless. And color sRGB standard. Save set output folder to the folder where near the other ones where we have all the data. Now position the camera numpad 0, click view, press F12. The render window opens. It will be dark. We have no light. That's expected. So close the window, ESC, and add a basic light. Shift A, light, sun, position above the scene, and render again F12. Better. If you actually have something on your first try, it means that one of the little lights is available. There's normally a little lamp. Convert that to a sun or delete that and add a sun if it's easier. Now, viewport render. For quick preview, press Z, render, or Shift Z, toggles. Adjust Eevee settings, screen space reflection on, ambient occlusion on, bloom off for now. This affects viewport and final render. So we tried the rendering, now we need to say it in the usual documents. First render test successful, Eevee engine 1080, no lights, initially added sunlight. Save the render, image, save as, and render window. Save it as render tests version 1. It's an odd, ugly little image, but it shows that we tried it and it worked for the first time. Right, let's wrap this up. By the end of week 1, you should have Blender installed and set up, your project folder organized, basic navigation down, your first tombstone and wall selection modeled, and your documentation started. You'll be comfortable with transform tools, basic modeling, modifiers, and viewpoint shading. So all the things you've done until now, you should be comfortable with it. If you're not, keep practicing a bit, because in the next part, we're going to get into more details, more difficult things, and as things go along, if you don't set the basis properly, the rest will start having problems. So, just a preview of episode 2, we'll dive into historical accuracy in modeling. Advanced tools like loop cuts, proportional editing, architectural principles of Scottish Gothic style, measurement and scale calibration, and deeper ethical considerations about accuracy against playability. Start gathering some detailed architectural references and floor plans. Look around Google, Google Scholar, images. Just make sure that you have the permission to use those images. I normally use either images that I am certain I have permission for, or I take my own images because I am in the area. But if you're not, please feel free to find images on the internet that you can use as reference, as long as they are referenced properly. So thanks for watching. If you found this helpful, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell for notifications, because I'm gonna keep on working on these videos, and you'll get a full detailed tutorial on how to use Blender. And eventually these videos will multiply into using Unreal, using Unity, creating adventure games, and always following archaeological and historical background and modeling. Share your week 1 progress in the comments. I'd love to see the tombstones and the castle walls. I really like seeing what my students came up with. And if you have any questions, please, again, share them at the bottom here. I will work on them and I will always answer. I'm always available. Until next time, keep constructing.